All right. So today we have with us Brittany Morrow. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background, Brittany has been riding motorcycles for quite some time. We're going to talk a little bit about her experiences with riding, her experiences in the motorcycle industry and the motorcycle world. Just get to know a little bit about her. So we've done our get to know series. We've had lots of folks in the motorcycle community. We've had random people that we met at different motorcycle events, and it's been great. We're going to shift gears a little bit more, right? And go really towards the motorcycle safety and just focus on that piece and talk to someone we haven't spoken to before, obviously, but I really love her perspective. I really love her story. And it's a powerful one for sure. But at the same time, I hope a lot of folks get some value out of it and really appreciate motorcycle safety as much as I do, appreciate just motorcycles as much as we do, because it takes a lot to kind of get back up after what she's been through. So Brittany, tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I know that you and I have kind of run into each other a couple of times in the past, and we haven't really been able to hang out for long periods of time, but from what I have experienced, it's an absolute pleasure and a joy to be able to be here with you today on the Zoom call, but also to be able to call you both a coworker and a friend, I guess, in the industry at least. And, you know, it's really cool to have women doing awesome stuff. So thank you for having me. All right. So a little bit about me. I think you hit most of it. I love motorcycles. I like helping people. And so I can kind of put those two things together with my past experiences and create a career out of it. And it kind of, you know, is my whole life. You said it already. I love our beautiful planet. I like exploring new places, and the motorcycle is the vehicle that gets me there. I feel like I'm a part of that place when I travel there on a motorcycle, as opposed to just traveling through it when I'm in a car. And that really inspires me to both continue to ride and love it every time I go out, but also to share that with others and hopefully inspire them to do it in a way that is safe, so that they are positively affecting both their lives and the lives of those that they love at the same time. Obviously, it's a hobby, a lifestyle, a sport that we choose, and a lot of people don't understand because it has inherent risks. So my job is really to help people learn that they can mitigate their risks and have an amazing time on motorcycles, no matter where they are or how long they've been riding. So that's me.
Absolutely. No, great story. So what was your first motorcycle?
My first motorcycle that I owned was a 2006 Yamaha R6. And she's still in the garage. She's my race bike now, but she was my street bike for 12 years, and I put 38,000 miles on her. Her name's Breezy, by the way. It is a she, she's just, you know, when you have something that has kind of helped you through a really hard time, and even if it's an inanimate object, it becomes part of you. That's Breezy to me. That's my R6.
Absolutely. So how long have you had her? You said 12 years?
No, I've had her since 2006. So okay. 14 years. Yeah, 14 years. It'll be 15 years in June of next year.
So what made you start riding?
When I was a little girl, I think I was 7 or 8 years old, my cousin Chad had a Honda Hurricane, and he took me for a ride on the back of his sport bike when I lived in California as a kid. And it was like the greatest thing that had ever happened. I actually rode as a passenger throughout my childhood. different types of motorcycles with different people, just usually friends, or, maybe boy interests when I was in my teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
That I grew up near an Air Force base. So there were a lot of Air Force guys who had sport bikes, and they would, hang out with the high school girls. I'm not saying that that's okay, but it's definitely what I did. So we would go out on rides and then cruise around on the back of sport bikes. And when I was 18, I really, really wanted to get my own.
Mm-hmm.
But life had a different plan for me, and I ended up moving to Japan for 2 years. Yeah. So with an Air Force boy, who would have thought?
Okay.
So when I was in Japan, I actually was learning how to ride in a parking lot, but it wasn't any formal training, and it wasn't on my own motorcycle. So that's kind of where I started, was as a passenger. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I thought it was the greatest thing, but I also wanted my own bike eventually.
Of course. Now, which one do you prefer? Because I've seen you on like cruises and I've seen you on sport bikes. So what's your favorite?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think no matter what, I'm always going to want something sporty, whether it's a full-on super sport or a naked sport bike, which I also have.
Mm-hmm.
And my brand new motorcycle that I just bought like 2 weeks ago is a supermoto. So I think no matter what, I'm always going to want something that has that sporty, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more, oomph behind it, as opposed to just cruising around low and slow.
Right. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. And, obviously when we first met, we met at AIM Expo in Columbus, Ohio in 2019. So it was my first little exhibit at AIM, and I was a little bit nervous. And you came over, you started talking to me and started looking at my products. I'm like, okay, all right. And we took this picture together. So I'm going to post that later on. But I mean, I'm thinking as I'm talking to you, like, man, this woman really knows her stuff. You knew a lot about motorcycle safety. You knew a whole slew of things. And I'm sitting here wondering, like, who in the world am I talking to? So of course I had to kind of go Google you and find out. And I mean, your story is absolutely amazing. So when I hear about, the crash queen, road rash queen, I mean, it's really interesting and kind of like heartfelt and heart-wrenching to kind of hear your story. Could you tell us a little bit about that to the folks that who haven't heard it before?
Sure. I was 20 years old. I met a boy at a party, and he was in the Air Force. There's a theme here, apparently.
A little bit.
And I was kind of, living for myself. I was really selfish at the time. It was really kind of just all about me and what I wanted, and it didn't really matter who was in my way or whose life I was affecting. So I just did a bunch of partying and a bunch of, kind of reckless stuff. And one of them was 2 days after meeting this boy at the party was to just jump on the back of his sport bike with him and go for a ride with him and his friends. Mm-hmm. So the only smart thing I did that day was I asked to borrow a full face helmet. Mm-hmm. In New Mexico, where I was living at the time. There is no law for wearing a helmet if you're over the age of 18. Mm-hmm. So I could have chosen to go without a helmet that day, but I decided to borrow a full face helmet from one of his friends who showed up for the ride. And they just brought this random 2XL G-Max helmet that had been sitting in his garage probably for about 8 years. And
wow.
I didn't even think twice. I was just like, yep, helmet, I'm good, woohoo. So, but I ended up falling off the back of that motorcycle. It was a Gixxer 750 that day at around 120 miles an hour because we were doing things that we weren't supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And I nearly lost my life that day. I skinned myself alive. 50% of my body was covered in 3rd-degree road rash. I lost half my left breast. Both of my kneecaps were kind of ripped off and crumbled. My left elbow was damaged. I had a compression fracture in my spine, and obviously some mental stuff that would come later that didn't affect me at the beginning, as far as, well, obviously being in the hospital. I was on so many medications and drugs to try and keep me comfortable and go through 9 surgeries. The first 2.5 months that I was in the hospital and outpatient physical therapy, I didn't realize the long-term consequences. So I put my parents' lives on hold. They weren't sure if I was going to make it. I was touch and go for a couple of weeks, and I lost a lot of blood. I got a blood clot while I was in the hospital. Things that, like, continue to compound. So that is kind of the short term of the story. And then, of course, the long term is that I'm permanently disfigured. I am disabled in the sense that I have had arthritis in my knees since I was 21 years old. I have a herniated disc in my lower back where the compression fracture happened. So I suffer with sciatica. It's just ongoing stuff. And then the PTSD is the big one. And, I can still remember lying on the ground. I remember tumbling. I remember being in the hospital. I remember what it felt like to have my dressings changed every day. And although it was to save my life, you can kind of liken that to torture. So 2.5 months of just physical torture every single day. It messes with you. So I definitely, 15 years later, mind you, I'm still suffering from PTSD as probably the most major injury, even though it's the one you can't see. So everyone sees my photos and sees the pictures of my road rash and my scars, but the real long-term effects are up here. And so I appreciate you asking, what happened, and letting me kind of explain that there's more to it than just I fell down, I scratched up my skin, and now I'm better.
Absolutely. And I think what most people don't always want to acknowledge, because sometimes there's a stigma, associated with, okay, just get back on there. We're doing it. I mean, as a former Marine, that's my motto. Okay, let's get over it. Let's get it done. So a lot of times we don't necessarily want to acknowledge or appreciate that whole healing process that has to take place on the inside. And, after years, it sounds like that's still something that you are working through.
Yes. And what's interesting about PTSD, obviously it's a little bit different for everyone, but there are some telltale signs. The only reason I knew that I was suffering from PTSD was years later. I was reading about PTSD and its effects and how it sometimes manifests itself. And I was like, that's me.
Right.
And part of that was because my experience made me not want to go to the doctor. It made me not want to be in any type of care under a doctor, because not that the doctors did anything wrong, but it was terrifying for me to be in a hospital or under someone's care, because it would just bring me back to where I was. And it was a really, really dark and scary place to be for a really long time. And I'm really thankful that I was able to wean myself off of medication, regardless of how much the doctors gave me, even after the hospital, because I was on a lot of really powerful drugs. And I know that that's something that a lot of people never get over. And I'm just really thankful that I was able to kind of get through that part, because I could have gone a different direction and been addicted, and then maybe have, become a drug addict, and who knows where I would be right now. If I hadn't had the support of my friends and family, and people just everywhere came to kind of help me. And that one thing I didn't reach out for was PTSD. So it took me a long time to kind of figure out what was going on. And then I finally started going to a counselor and kind of trying to work through it. So the longer you delay, if you're having issues like that, I think the longer that your healing process is going to take. One thing that has helped is telling my story a lot. Every time I tell my story, it's hard, but it helps because it's part of the healing process. So yeah, there's lots of therapies I'm still exploring, but that is definitely going to be the ongoing long-term struggle, along with, some of the disabilities and disfigurements. It's up here. So yeah.
Absolutely. We talk about getting over it, and you talk about, coping mechanisms and just being able to cope with that. How did you actually start to get back on? I'm going to tell you now, I had like a little boo-boo compared to what I'm hearing. And it's like, with me, it was more so that whole not knowing part, not knowing what I did wrong. That was a big hesitation for me. But with you, how did you kind of cope? How did you decide, okay, this is what I'm getting ready to do right now?
So I have always been a very A-type personality. So go-getter, got to do it now, get it done, just even if you're scared. So I knew that I wanted to get back on a motorcycle because I knew that it wasn't the motorcycle's fault.
Right.
I knew that it was something that I had done, and that the person I was riding with, we had made mistakes, but it wasn't the motorcycle's fault. And I loved riding. I loved riding so much that I didn't want to decide that motorcycling was the bad thing, that it was about the decisions that I had made, and that I could absolutely do things better.
Right.
And when I realized that I could do that for myself, I figured out that I could also kind of be that beacon for other people. So you bet I was terrified. I was so terrified to get back on. But I knew I needed to do it in order to not be afraid for the rest of my life, and also to keep that thing that I loved so much as a part of my life. So I got back on the back. Of a motorcycle, like less than a month out of the hospital.
Wow.
But it was just through the parking lot because I was shaking and my heart was racing and I was just terrified. But I knew if I didn't do it, then I would never be able to get back on, and I would always be afraid of something that I loved, and I didn't want that. So I made the decision that this is what needed to happen, even if it was hard, even if I was scared, even if it took a really long time, even if it took a bunch of rides for me to get over how scared I was. I needed to do it. And I just decided that that was the answer. And I did it.
Absolutely.
It was really hard, but I did it.
That kind of just goes to show with the character and the intestinal fortitude and everything else that goes along with your image of, the whole badass part. Because it takes a lot to be a woman motorcyclist in this day and age. Just period. With all the things that we see through history, with the stigma that goes with, women in motorcycles, it takes a lot. And so when you hear about it, I was reading just the other day where, like, shortly after coming out of the hospital, that you were already kind of walking around doing a lot of stuff that you probably weren't supposed to do that soon, but you were doing anyway. So that's character. What was that like, getting out of the hospital and transitioning out?
So honestly, leaving the hospital was the best thing that ever happened in my recovery, because if anyone has ever been in the hospital for longer than just, a quick stop, you've been there overnight, if you've been in a room, if you've been there for 60 days in a row and had your friends and family come in to visit you, it's like a prison. And there's no sunshine on your face. There's no breeze. There's no smell of flowers or pine trees. It's this sterile environment that almost feels like you're kind of in limbo. And leaving the hospital and going back to my parents' house where I had to be because I couldn't take care of myself yet. I was like a little baby. It really changed everything. Having, the ability to go outside, and I went home a day before Thanksgiving. So to have the smells of Thanksgiving dinner and being able to eat dinner with my family, like, that's the kind of stuff that reminds you of why you want to fight to live in the first place. And then being at home, it was just, once I had that kind of refresh moment and like, I want to be here.
Right.
Then there was no stopping me.
Absolutely. So we actually recently hung out at the Women's Sport Bike Rally up in Robbinsville, North Carolina. Yeah, I love it. That's me right there. And I'm going to tell you now, I don't always get a chance to hang out with a bunch of cool women and just kind of, shoot the breeze and just kind of relax for a little bit. And this was a little bit different this year. Tell us about the Women's Sport Bike Rally.
So the Women's Sport Bike Rally. So Women's Sport Bike Rally changed my life in 2007 because I went there on Breezy on my R6, but I'd been living in New Mexico and Florida. So when I first started riding, I was living in New Mexico, and I didn't do any of the fun twisty roads around here because I was a brand new rider and I just wanted, to gain confidence on the bike. So I did a lot of straight road riding, and then I moved to Florida, which was a lot of straight road riding and a lot of really, hot weather and a lot of rain. So I just never really did anything on my sport bike that the sport bike's really meant to do, except go fast in a straight line.
Right.
And I went to the Women's Sport Bike Rally in 2007 up in Deals Gap. And I was like, what is this? What is this road? What is this place? And it was a group of women who were amazing riders and also amazing humans. And it gave me a jolt of energy that there is more to riding motorcycles than just going straight. And that I could be a really great rider if I worked really hard and kind of, applied what I had learned and used it in a safe way. So the friendships that I made at that first women's motorcycle rally or women's sport bike rally, I still have. These friends are still my friends. And this is 14 years later. So I kept going. I kept going year after year after year. And it, slowly over time, it was growing. And my best friend, Stephanie, was the founder of the Women's Sport Bike Rally. And after 10 years, she was like, I'm tired. I need a break. I want to be a participant again. I don't want to be in charge anymore. Right. But I would like for the Women's Sport Bike Rally to continue if someone would step up and take the reins and keep it true to its roots. And I raised my hand and she said yes. So for the last 5 years, I've been doing the Women's Sport Bike Rally as the director, as opposed to as a participant. And she's totally right. It's totally different as a participant than as the director, but this year was special, like you mentioned. So instead of a massive amount of group rides and workshops and special guest speakers and catered meals and like a really set rigid schedule where we just like pack your weekend full of awesome, information, education, camaraderie, friendship. Friendship kind of comes naturally anyways, but instead of doing that this year, we went unplugged because of, situations. But it's funny because we actually chose to go unplugged before this as a way to kind of get back to where it had all started. And it's a girls' weekend where men are allowed. They are allowed as, invited guests. So, they've kind of been vetted. They're not there to pick up on anyone, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had a love match made at a women's sport bike rally. I don't know. But it's definitely the kind of weekend you don't get all the time. And these girls, these women that come to this event, I see them once a year. And yet they're like my best friends. There's just a bond when you do something that has a little bit of danger built into it, and you're choosing to participate in that activity with people, and they're encouraging of each other, and they're lifting up each other. Even after you go to the rally, the whole year, you're on each other's social medias, you're texting each other. Sometimes you're meeting up outside of the rally, and it's just this vehicle for women's sport bike community that really it sustains itself as long as we continue to have that event every year. The relationships are self-sustaining and they're lifelong, and it is so cool to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Why do you think something like that's necessary at this point? I mean, we have a lot of different things, but why the weekend? Why a women's only deal?
There's something magical about meeting in person.
Yes.
And there are a lot of motorcycle events that are open to, women and men.
Mm-hmm.
Because motorcycling is traditionally male dominated. If you go to a regular motorcycle event, things are going to be catered more towards the male side of things. And there's not a whole lot of specific information or events for women. Now, over the last 5 years, we have seen a massive influx in the amount of events that are specific for women.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the Women's Sport Bike Rally is important and so close to my heart is because it's specific to who I am. Because we're women, we ride sport bikes, but we're women who ride sport bikes.
Right.
And that there's a lot that goes into that. And not just being a sport bike rider, but being a woman on a sport bike. We have the same concerns. We need the same type of training. We need the same type of confidence building, and we can answer each other's questions. We can help each other out with apparel. We can help each other out with accessories. We can help each other out with performance. Yeah. And there's just something really magical about having that connection and getting it in person. I think that's why it will continue for as long as someone is willing to do the work to make it happen. Right. The women who come to this event are the ones who perpetuate the camaraderie, the friendship, the education. It's all really built in. But you can't get that anywhere else. You can't get it anywhere else. And it matters. It matters to me, and it matters to 100+ women who come every year. And it's really cool to know that there's enough of us out there to have an event like this. And we have one on the West Coast too, usually. And this year, we wanted to expand to 4 locations, but hopefully 2021, maybe 2022, there are enough women on sport bikes out there to have events like this. And I just think that's really cool because we're kind of the unicorns, we're the super rare, and women riding motorcycles is rare anyways, but then being on a sport bike, we're like the 0.1% of the 1% of the 1%. So, right. Yeah, it's special to be able to have your fellow humans who love all the same things as you in the same place.
Absolutely. One thing I could appreciate when I was up there, riding through some of the curves with you guys, is the skill. I mean, you guys are guys and gals are just like really skillful when it comes to maneuvering your bikes, maneuvering your motorcycles, going in and out of the curves, keeping your speed, following your lines, keeping your lines. I mean, I learned a lot just by looking and just by riding with you. How did you gain some of that?
So first of all, that was me in 2007 showing up and being like, wow, everyone's so much better. Everyone's such a great rider. I became a motorcycle safety instructor, a rider coach with the Motorcycle Safety Foundation in 2009. And the way I got there was going to the Women's Sport Bike Rally and realizing that there's a lot more skill involved when you are leaning the bike and going through tight, twisty corners than just kind of going fast in a straight line, as I mentioned when I lived in Florida. So I wanted to get really good. And I knew that the best way to do that was through training because I wanted to do it safely. I still have to this day that fear of, what if I hit the ground? Because I know how bad it can be. I don't want that to happen. So I'm trying to do everything in my power to make sure that it doesn't happen. So training in a parking lot or training on a racetrack was absolutely the number one, answer to leveling my skill up. I didn't have the advantage of living in a place like Deals Gap. So I didn't have a bunch of roads to go and practice on. I will say that as a safety instructor since 2009, I have never and will never treat the road like it's my playground or my practice track. That is not how I operate. If you want to push your limits, then I suggest you go somewhere that has a controlled environment. It's just really the only option to mitigate your risk as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And then you take those skills that you've learned and you apply them to the street so that you are a safer rider on the street. You're having more fun. Can I please tell you that, like, it's not just because you want to be good and because you want to be fast on the street, but man, it is so comfortable to know what you're doing, and you have so much more fun when you're just like, woo, this is great, as opposed to having to focus so hard on what you're doing because your skill level isn't there yet. Being a better rider means having more fun, and at least that's what it's meant for me. So that was always my goal. It's always going to be my goal. It's still my goal. I do training every year. I go to the racetrack. I race. I'm constantly practicing in a safe environment and then applying it back to the road, because you can never be good enough.
Absolutely. I co-sign that one. So as we talk about the Motorsport Bike Rally, I was looking at all the other things that you do. You're a mentor, you're a writer, you're a VP, you're like everything. First of all, what all do you really do? And second of all, how the heck do you find the time?
I don't know how to answer that question. No. So I am the vice president, and I also hold the secretary and treasurer role at my AMA sanctioned race organization here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That is Sandia Motorcycle Road Racing. And we have an event once a month, Saturdays track day, Sundays races. That is, it's a decent amount of work simply because I hold 3 offices. And the advantage is that I'm helping people do something really fun in a safe place. If it wasn't for the volunteers at every race organization across the United States, none of us are getting rich off of it, I promise. If it wasn't for the volunteers, there wouldn't be the opportunity to go and learn these skills in a safe, controlled place. That made my life better. So now me volunteering is me helping others to do the same and continue my learning as well. I am a mentor with the Can-Am Women's Mentorship Program. So in 2018, I did the press launch for the Can-Am Riker when it first came out. And I just fell in love with it because it's kind of the bridge between being a car driver and getting on 2 wheels. And whether you cross the bridge completely or you stay on the bridge forever, the fact that it's a vehicle that kind of gets you out of the car and onto an open air vehicle, it's just an amazing, fun machine. And I think it's going to allow more people, not just women, but more people in general to experience what we experience. Even though it's not a motorcycle, it's definitely not a car, and it's absolutely still fun. So I'm a mentor with the Can-Am Women's Mentorship Program to help more women become riders through the 3-wheeled door, as opposed to trying to get them immediately on a motorcycle.
Right.
So I've been doing that for the last year. It is so much fun. And really cool stat I'm just going to throw out. This year, 60% of the humans who signed up for 3-wheel training were women.
Really?
60%. That's massive.
Wow,
we barely are like 19% of the industry, but 60% of all of the new riders taking classes this year at the 3-wheel side of things were women. So this mentorship program is working, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. Can-Am really cares about women. They care about minorities. They care about people from diverse communities, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. So I'm really happy to work with that company. I also write for Web Bike World, lots of articles, a lot of gear reviews. Obviously gear is near and dear to my heart because of what happened to me, and I'm constantly trying to find the best stuff. And when I say best, it doesn't mean just one aspect, the most protective, but I feel like we shouldn't have to compromise as women when it comes to looking good, feeling good, and being protected. And so I'm constantly on the hunt for products that fill that. And so that's one of the reasons why I think you're so cool.
Thank you.
Because you do that for us, and taking matters into your own hands. I can't imagine what it's like to start my own apparel company and run it and be successful and still be friendly and show up to events. So kudos on you. Where do you find the time?
I have no idea, but it's okay. We can figure it out. We figure it out. They always say you make time for the things that are important for you. And it sounds like motorcycling is like the most important, because when I look at everything that you have done and what you are doing, it's like your entire world revolves around motorcycling. And I mean, that's pretty impressive, because to have that be your love and then be able to do that every day and that be the focus every day. I mean, that's impressive. So I'm glad you found your passion.
Yes. Yeah. The purpose of life is to find your purpose, right? So I feel very fortunate to have found a purpose that I don't know, I feel like I was kind of built for it simply because of what I went through. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing else like it. Working for something that matters to you, and if it helps other people at the same time, man, there's no better feeling. Better.
Absolutely. So where do you see yourself going from here?
Great question. So I kind of hit on it a little bit. Excuse me, I need some water. I kind of hit on it a little bit with the Women's Sport Bike Rally wanting to expand.
Right.
I'd really like to see the Women's Sport Bike Rally become an event that is not really, I mean, I guess you could call it a franchise, where women from wherever in the world can say, hey, I want to have a Women's Sport Bike Rally where I live, and empower them to hold that event, and staying true to the Women's Sport Bike Rally roots and what we stand for, mm-hmm. but being in charge of hosting an event in their hometown and inviting people from all over the country, all over the world, really, because we have people from New Zealand and Canada who have come to the Women's Sport Bike Rally in the United States, inviting them to your home and saying, this is my playground. This is where I like to ride. Let me show you a good time here. And at the same time, still being true to the Women's Sport Bike Rally roots. So education, camaraderie, lifelong friendships. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to see us develop that. And I have a team of staff that have kind of been on board with me since I had this idea at the end of 2019. Mm-hmm. We've really been talking about, and I shouldn't say my idea, I should say our idea, because it's never just one person. I have an amazing team and we do this together. So it's not just me, and it's never been just me. Mm-hmm. Our idea to expand the Women's Sport Bike Rally and empower women to be the hosts, I would love to see that. We wanted to start that this year by expanding, and then COVID ruins everything. So yeah, a little bit. But that's still my dream as far as the Women's Sport Bike Rally goes. I would love to see that. As a volunteer at the race track and the race organization, I haven't really had a lot of time to do the racing myself, or at least focus on it. I'm just not getting any better because I'm working, I'm doing all this stuff and this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this stuff. So I would really like to step back from that volunteer position, or at least not have 3 offices, and focus on some racing for myself. Especially with the new Supermoto that I just got, I really, really, really want to kind of take my riding to another level and take the bike off-road. So the next step for me is to continue to be a journalist and an adventurer, but also expand into off-road. I don't, see myself being a motocross rider or doing sweet jumps or anything, but definitely forest roads, maybe some, Jeep style trails. I live just a couple hours south of some of the most amazing mountain passes in Colorado. Mm-hmm. So that's a dream of mine at this point, is to inspire more women and more people in general to try this, whether it's on 3 wheels or 2 wheels. Continue doing things that make people go, you know what? That looks like a lot of fun. I really want to try that.
Mm-hmm. So what piece of advice would you give to someone that's just thinking about being a motorcyclist, but not quite there yet?
Oh man. The thing is that there's this internal, it's an internal decision, and I can't make that for them, but I can tell them that you will never know what it feels like until you try. Mm-hmm. And there are places that will let you try without risking a lot, putting yourself in a lot of danger, without spending a lot of money. All you have to do is sign up for a safety course. They let you borrow the motorcycle, they let you borrow the gear, and it's in a controlled environment, and you never know until you try. It changed my life. It's changed so many people's lives. And you won't know if it's going to change your life until you try it. You have to give yourself the chance to experience the joy. And if it's not for you, then there's nothing wrong with that. But you're never going to know until you try.
That is so true. So as we start to wrap this down, one question that I always ask everyone is about legacy. What would you like your legacy to be?
I would like my legacy to be of course you asked me this question and I'm like, whoa, I don't know. Encouraging and inspiring others to love motorcycling and do everything in their power to do it safely, and inspire them to get over any obstacle, no matter how unsurmountable it seems, that they can do it. They just have to put their mind to it. They have to keep moving forward, and that they can ask for help. So I want to leave a legacy of helping people to get through those types of things, whether it's being a better motorcyclist or getting through a tragedy or an injury. I really think that, helping my fellow humans is something that I would want to be remembered for. If nothing else, I would want to be remembered for being there for people and helping them get through whatever it is, inspiring them to keep moving forward.
I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, for taking the time to talk to us, for all the stuff that you're doing in the motorcycle community, for the Women's Sport Bike Rally. I try to be there next year, hopefully, if everything goes okay. But everything else that you're doing, I mean, kudos to you. Hats off for stepping up and actually getting back on there. It could have obviously gone any other way. You could have just been like, forget it. No, but you know what? You took that next step, you got over it, and you kept moving. And I think you're an inspiration to so many people out there, and I appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you, Sean. I really want to say thank you very much for what you do for our community as well. Apparel, obviously, I love it so much, and you're doing what it takes to make a difference, and not just doing something that makes money. I think you're making a difference. And I also want to say thank you so much for sacrificing some of your freedoms as a Marine, so that people like me can experience the ultimate freedom of riding a motorcycle.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. Thank you. All right. Take care, Brittany, and I will see you another time.
Thank you, Sean. It's so good to see your face.
I know, right? All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.